I can't imagine preaching through Proverbs without spending a little bit of time talking about one of the most famous passages in Proverbs, if not the entire Bible. You all had to know it was coming when we started Proverbs, the series on Proverbs, but we're finally here to Proverbs 31. And it's a poem, and it's a passage that the sages of Israel say till the very end of Proverbs. And so we're going to read it. Proverbs 31, it's beginning in verse 10. We're going to read through verse 31 together. A woman or wife, in the original language, it's either or, could be translated woman or wife. So a woman or wife of noble character, who can find? She's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it's still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grabs the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Woo! I'm tired just reading it. What a woman! No. Right? What a woman. I mean, she does it all. And I mean, she does it all. She does the shopping. She provides the food. She buys the land. She plants the crops. She sows. She gets up early when it's dark outside and works till it's late and still dark outside. She takes care of everyone in her family and those in her household. And she also takes care of the poor and the needy and those in the community. And when she's not taking care of everybody around her, she's got a little side business where she sells fine linen and garments. It's unreal. Her children wake up in a blessed mood. How can they not? Her husband praises her at the public square. Well, of course he does. She's the one who's doing all the work. Give him a chance to go be the elder and talk with all of his buddies at the town gate. Of course he does. Well, like most of what we read in Proverbs, the perspective is given from the male's point of view, and this is no different. And this woman in this poem is honored specifically because she makes it possible for her husband to live a blessed life. And that's what frames this poem, at least initially. It's a husband, a man praising a woman who makes his life much easier. Now, Proverbs is a book of wisdom. We've learned that. Probably already knew that, but we are in the midst of this series and we're talking about wisdom. We read Proverbs to gain wisdom so we can understand Proverbs. So what wisdom is this poem at the end of Proverbs trying to tell us? What's this little poem trying to teach us? Well, I think in the most obvious way, it's acknowledging what every wise man in the world already knows. And that is our lives as men are blessed. We're blessed, sustained, and held together by strong, capable women. That's what I think is the most obvious lesson we can learn from that particular passage. Either our moms growing up or our wives if we're married. So, on behalf of all the men in the room, may I address the ladies. We simply could not make it without you. And all the men said, so yeah, we're going to try that again. It wasn't bad, I would say, but I'm not trying to set you up for anything. And all the men said, Amen. Women in our lives, strong, capable women, hold us together. Couldn't be more true. But this story I like, it even happened this morning in class, it happened this morning in my house, not along these same lines, but it happened in context. It's interesting how we're saying it, but there's a story about a married couple. They've been married for 50 years. They're sitting out on the front porch. They're sitting there together, and the wife looks over to the husband and says, go inside and put a sweater on. So he gets up and goes inside and puts on a sweater and comes back out and sits next to her for a few minutes. They're just sitting there together, and he says to his wife, was I cold or are we going somewhere? Well, that's really the way it works, isn't it? There's a reason why preachers read this particular passage. They dust it off on Mother's Day. They preach from it, read from it, because it's a celebration, right? It's a celebration of all the many different things that strong, capable, virtuous, noble women do to make the world go round. But as we'll learn, Proverbs isn't what you always seem. Things aren't like they always seem when you read Proverbs. It's more than just a general celebration of women. It does seem that this poem is on a slightly deeper level than that. On one slightly different level, it does seem that this poem is trying to tell young men what kind of woman they need to marry on a slightly different, deeper level. Remember, the target audience of Proverbs is young men. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs is a father talking to his son about how to live your life. Go get wisdom and do whatever it takes to get it. He makes a series of speeches to his son, and he's imparting wisdom to him. He's giving him instruction that he needs so desperately to navigate life so that he can make wise decisions. Father, in the first 9 chapters, references women often. One thing that he's always telling his son is be careful about certain kinds of women. Avoid certain kinds of women. Avoid certain parts of town that certain kinds of women are going to be there so that you can avoid sexual immorality. There's that kind of wisdom. And if you're reading Proverbs and you're not a young man in need of that kind of advice, you're just going to have to flip it so that it could apply to a young woman as well. But if you're not a young man or a young woman, and that kind of advice does not apply to you, then you have to read what he says and you have to mine it even deeper for truths and wisdom that you can apply to different people in different situations. But either way, there is all kinds of wisdom in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs that you can find. One of the most important lessons that his father passes on to his son is that one of the most important decisions of his life is choosing the person that he is going to spend the rest of his life with. In Proverbs chapter 5, the father warns his son against committing adultery. That's a great way to get yourself killed, he tells him. So let's not do that. But then, to give him a positive vision over the relationship with a woman, he says, don't commit adultery. Instead, enjoy the wife of your youth. We're not going to read the passage from chapter 5 this morning because there are children in the room. But you trust me, it's a good one. You can go on and read it for yourself. But chapter 12, we have this wisdom. It seems to be a preview of what we're reading in chapter 31. From chapter 12. It says, her husband's crown, again, it's the male speaking, it's good to have a good wife. However, a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. Choose wisely, son. You could hear his father saying behind the scenes. Choose wisely. Or Proverbs 14, verse 1 says the wise woman builds her. You thought I was going to say the wise man builds his house. But no, it says the wise woman builds her house. The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands, the foolish one tears her down. This just seems to be a quick summary of what we're going to come and see in chapter 31. That poem in chapter 31 is going to give us a longer look at what it means for a wise woman to build her house. So on some level, we read this poem. It's an ideal description of the kind of woman a young man should aspire to marry. No question about it. But this poem is idealistic. When I have come across, I didn't realize this, but it's just amazing. When you spend time in a book, you realize things. You look for information. This poem is an acrostic. It's in the original language. Every line is the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Interesting. It's done with great intentionality. It's not an accident. You got to imagine if you have a poem in English and you have 26 lines, the first line is a wife of noble character. A. B. Beautiful in her husband's eyes. You see how it works? If that was done in English, we would have caught it a little bit quicker. But we don't catch it because it doesn't translate so well. And we don't pick up on it. So this is an ancient Hebrew literary form, and it was meant to signify affection or completion. It's the last chapter of Proverbs. And it's showing affection to something. The very nature of the poem says that this is a perfect poem. And it's written for the perfect woman. And the gist of this poem seems to be this young woman or this young man or young men who are listening carefully seems to be, son, if you can find a woman like this, if you can find a woman who can do all of these things, if you can find a woman like this, let her build a house and make sure you're in it. Because your life is going to be blessed. Life will go very well for you. And you will live happily ever after. Sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? Well, it has come to my attention that it's not always viewed that way, as a fairy tale, as a recognition of noble things. It's come to my attention that not every woman hears this poem out of Proverbs 31 that way. They don't see it and hear it as good news. Sometimes when this poem is read in church, or it's preached from the pulpit, or it's discussed in small group, rather than feeling honored and inspired, women leave feeling guilty and overwhelmed and discouraged. Because they don't feel they can possibly live up to what's being described in Proverbs 31 in the poem. It's not good news. It's a major bummer in their eyes. And if you disagree with that assessment of how some women hear this poem, don't come complaining to me. Take it up with the women in this congregation. Because it can be a burden. It's a lot to ask. Because if we understand the meaning behind the poem, then we can understand. And while I'm at it, this is a good time to say to all the single men in the room, which would be my two sons, it's probably not a good idea to take this poem seriously either. It's not a checklist. It's not, this is what my wife is going to be, all the way down the list. You know what that is? That's warning. Warning. Disaster is coming. Disappointment is coming if you are looking for someone to fulfill every one of those checklist items as your wife. You could read this. It's in the Bible, Proverbs 31. We just read it. You could read this and think, I'm supposed to marry a woman that doesn't exist. Actually, she does exist. She's right over there around the corner dealing with our youngest daughter. Sorry, I don't know what else I'm supposed to say in that regard, but to my married brothers, you got to listen to the voice of wisdom here. Never read this poem out loud to your wife as your marriage is transitioning from I do to you better. That'll get you killed too. Because there's more than one way to die in Proverbs. But what was originally intended to be this epic, heroic, idealistic celebration of what strong, capable women can do has become, for many, it seems, a source of discouragement and disappointment for many men and women. Maybe that's why some of the men in ancient Israel had more than one wife. I don't know, maybe it was the only way they could check all the boxes. Who knows? You're going to be in charge of the estate. You're going to make the food. You're going to do the clothes. You're going to buy the land. You're going to run the business. It seems that nobody likes that joke. Polygamy, right? What's wrong with polygamy these days, you know? I mean, it's like, you used to be able to joke about polygamy in church, and they can't do that anymore. But that's all right. Or maybe, more likely, in my opinion, this poem was never intended to be taken seriously. Never intended to be taken literally, because it's obviously this overly romanticized, idealistic, unrealistic description of what women, wives, and mothers are called to be. Not just in our culture, but in that culture in which this was written, for sure. Because one scholar, after doing some looking around, argues that it's likely there was never a woman in the history of ancient Israel that had the freedom and opportunity to do everything that that woman was described in doing. Even if she were very wealthy, she would have never been able to do all of it. And of course not. It's not realistic. Which leads me to what I think the biggest point is. Well, maybe one of the reasons we don't hear this as good news, maybe one of the reasons this has become a burden, maybe the reason we misread this poem is because we're applying it to the wrong woman. Maybe there's more going on in this poem than just a description of a young man and his ideal wife. Maybe upon closer reading, there's more going on in this poem, which I have found happened more than once reading this book. There is wisdom for all of us, not just young men and not just young women. There is wisdom here for all of us, waiting for us to find it, but we're going to have to dig for it. Because it's available on a much deeper and profound level, in my opinion. Because maybe this poem was held to the very end of Proverbs for a reason. Because it reinforces the main idea that we've been talking about this entire series all along. You notice at the beginning of the poem, the wife of noble character is said to be more precious than rubies. More worth more than anything else in the world. So valuable. And if we're paying attention, or if we've been paying attention as we read through Proverbs, we'll remember that the exact same description was applied to Lady Wisdom, the personification of wisdom. Lady Wisdom in the early chapters of Proverbs, in chapter 3 and again, and in chapter 8, the exact same description of that woman, Lady Wisdom, the wife of noble character, far more valuable than rubies. Go back to Proverbs 3, verse 15. Speaking of Lady Wisdom, she's more precious than rubies. Nothing you can desire can compare with her. And Proverbs 8, not Romans 8, Proverbs 8, chapter 11, wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare to her. Over and over again, you see the comparison. Now, at the end of the poem, it says that this woman fears the Lord. Well, at the beginning of Proverbs, what does it say the beginning of wisdom is? You can't have wisdom without the fear of the Lord. And this woman embodies the fear of the Lord, embodies wisdom. Maybe when we read this poem and we consider all what this industrious woman does and the way she miraculously gets it done, maybe instead of reading and saying, that's unrealistic, maybe we read it as the epitome of wisdom. The personification of wisdom. This is what wisdom looks like in action. Because this woman is no fool, right? She's not a hothead, she's not a big mouth, and she is certainly not a sluggard. She's the opposite of all those fools that we have spent so much time learning about through our series on Proverbs. Instead, Proverbs says, God's wisdom will make all of us into this type of person if we will just listen and follow and obey. The woman isn't some lucky guy's wife. This woman is none other than Lady Wisdom herself, showing up one last time at the end of Proverbs to make sure that we get the message. Because back in Proverbs chapter 9, her house and have dinner with her and dine with her at her table. And we're given a choice in chapter 9. You can go home with Lady Wisdom, or you can go home with Dame Folly. You can follow the path of wisdom, or you can follow the path of foolishness. And we're warned that if you choose to go home with, if you choose to spend time with, if you choose to eat with the wrong kind of woman, it's going to ruin your life. So choose wisely. Choose carefully. And if this woman in Proverbs chapter 31 is actually Lady Wisdom, and I believe it is, then she's showing up one last time so that we can hear it one last time. We've been hearing it from the very beginning of this book, all the way through Proverbs, and we hear it one more time in a dramatic way. And the message is, life is good when you live in Lady Wisdom's house. It is good to spend time with Lady Wisdom. It is so good to be Lady Wisdom's companion. Be her friend. It's good to be the son or the daughter of Lady Wisdom. You're going to be blessed when she builds her house and you're in it. What this poem's not telling us is that in order to live a good and blessed, happy life, we have to find the perfect mate or the perfect spouse or the perfect wife or it's not telling us that. What it is telling us is that Lady Wisdom is going to take care of you. That's what it is telling you. It's definitely a blessing to find a compatible spouse. Those of us that are married know that it's a blessing. But you don't have to be married to be blessed. You don't have to find just the right person in order to be happy. This poem points us beyond the literal message or marriage that Jesus and Paul do in the New Testament. They show us that you don't have to be married to do good. You don't have to be married to be blessed. You don't have to be married to live a life that's pleasing to God. But what this poem is telling all of us, and I hope we're hearing it loud and clear, but what this poem is saying to all of us, young, old, single, married, rich, or poor, it is saying when you make God's wisdom the number one priority in your life, when you make it the one thing that you realize is more valuable than all the rubies in the world, when you make it the number one priority in your life, you will not be sorry. Lady Wisdom is going to take care of you. And so, here we are at the end of the series, the very end of the book, and we're given one last chance to listen. You've made it this far, and you're still putting it off. You still haven't committed your life to being shaped, informed, and directed by God's wisdom. There's one last, undeniable, irresistible description of what Lady Wisdom's house is like. This is what it means to live in her house. It's how good it can be when you give your life to God's wisdom. And the poet's point, in my opinion, cannot be more clear. Let me get back on that slide. You'd have to be a fool to read this book and not want to live in Lady Wisdom's house. So don't be a fool. Let's go home with Lady Wisdom, with her wisdom on our minds and in our hearts, with her wisdom being revealed through everything that we do. Let's stand together and sing.